Hey guys! Alright, so I'm actually really into these side-by-side wear tests recently, so I hope you guys are liking them too because we're doing another one today. So if you saw last week's video, or one of last week's videos, I compared a full face of drugstore to a full face of high-end comparable products. Not necessarily dupes, just kind of alternatives, and I was really curious to see overall if I ended up liking the high-end or the drugstore side better, but I was actually kind of bummed that the high-end side ended up winning over the drugstore side because you guys know me, I'm always rooting for drugstore. So as a follow-up to that video, I wanted to challenge myself to look through my collection and see if I could find a full face of drugstore makeup that would outperform a comparable set of high-end makeup. And we're gonna test them side by side to see if I'm right. So I wanted to make sure that I was choosing both high-end and drugstore products that I actually like. I didn't want to just go looking for high-end products that I already know I don't like as much as the drugstore makeup. I wanted to keep it as fair as possible, so I chose high-end products that I already do really like, and then I chose drugstore products that I think are similar to those that I think are at least as good. So on my face right now, one side is completely drugstore and the other side is high-end, and I would love for you to leave your guesses down below as to which side you think is drugstore and which side you think is high-end before we get into the application. So leave your guesses down below, maybe pause the video. Alright, so now that you've left your guesses down below, let's go ahead and get into the product application, and I will, of course, reveal which side is which. Alright, I want to go straight in with foundation and skip primer today because I think that'll allow us to get a better sense of how the foundations are wearing on their own. We'll just have fewer variables. I am wearing the Rovectin Anti-Irritant UV Defense all over my face, so that is a somewhat mattifying sunscreen. I love that sunscreen underneath glowy base products, which is why I chose it to go along with the two foundations that I'm comparing today because both of these are glowy. So the high-end foundation is an old favorite. This is the Urban Decay Hydromaniac, and the drugstore foundation, I haven't worn this a ton as a standalone foundation. I have like once or twice before, but this is the e.l.f. Halo Glow Liquid Filter. Normally I mix it with foundations, but this can actually be worn alone as a glowy foundation as well. So I'm really curious to see how these two compare to each other. Last time we did drugstore on this side and high-end on this side. I think I'm going to reverse it today. So today we'll do drugstore on this side and high-end over here. So I'm going to start out with the e.l.f. Liquid Filter. And this I have in the shade 1. I did see that they came out with some new shades of this. I'm going to tap both of these out with a sponge today. I'm just using the AOA Paw Paw sponge. I'm going to do just one thin layer on either side, and then I may build both up if I want more coverage. So I'm going to take about like a half a pea-sized amount over here of the Urban Decay. And I'm making sure to use a different part of my sponge for this one so they don't mix accidentally. I do want to build up just a little bit more of that e.l.f. foundation. So there are both of those foundations blended out. I would say they look a lot different. I mean, I was expecting them to look pretty different because they are very different products. The e.l.f. one has a lot more glow to it. The Urban Decay one, I mean, it's a little bit glowy, you can see, but I do think the matte sunscreen underneath does bring down the glow of that Urban Decay foundation quite a bit. Whereas with the e.l.f. one, it just has so much luminosity to the formula itself. But once we have powder on, I think they will probably look more similar. Next, for under eye concealer, I was realizing that these two concealers actually have pretty similar claims. The high-end one is the Urban Decay Stay Naked, which is actually being discontinued. So if this was your holy grail and you're looking for an alternative, I actually feel like the LA Girl Pro Conceal is pretty similar in terms of finish and coverage. My opinion on this concealer has had a lot of ups and downs, but recently I've really been enjoying it and I actually find it pretty similar to this Urban Decay one. Also skipping color corrector today, I'm just gonna do concealer. So there's the Urban Decay. Here is the LA Girl. I honestly don't love the brush tip applicator. Do kind of prefer a doe foot, but you know, it's not a huge deal. One of you guys told me that the trick with this concealer is to let it sit for a minute or two before you blend it out. Alright, so I've given those both about a minute. Okay, I actually feel like I got more coverage out of that Urban Decay concealer than I normally do, letting it sit just for a little while. I really need to get in the habit of doing that more because when I do it really does make a difference. I always say when I'm doing side-by-side comparisons like this eye, my left eye, the under eye is a lot more prominent on this side than on my right side. So whichever products go on the left under eye always have a little bit of a disadvantage. But you can see they both have a very similar finish, kind of just a satin skin-like finish. They're not super glowy and dewy, which I prefer. I don't really like to have a ton of glow to my under eyes. So happy with both of those. I do feel like the Urban Decay side looks just a little bit better and it blended out a little bit better. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit more Pro Conceal since this under eye needs a little more help than the other one. Looking up close, I mean, I really can't tell a huge difference. Like I said, the finish is really similar. I think the coverage level is pretty similar. I would say I got high medium coverage with both. I wanted to compare two of my favorite cream bronzers today. So the drugstore one here is the Soul Body Bronzing Balm in Fair, and the high-end one is the No Limits cream bronzer from LYS in the shade Motivate. The price difference on these is actually not that big. The LYS one retails for $20 and the Soul Body one retails for $15. But the Soul Body one also comes with 4 times as much product as the LYS. Alright, so first going with the LYS, it seems like the stick has come loose, unfortunately. Like it doesn't stick to the bottom anymore, so when I turn it I have to just press it with my finger sometimes. Is there a way to fix that? Let me know. Yeah, this one is always so nice and easy to blend. And then the Soul Body Bronzing Balm. This one is a similar shade to the LYS. Now that those are both blended out, I really can't tell a big difference between those shades. I think they look very similar on my skin. And right now I don't really have a preference as to which one looks better. I think they both blended out really well. Yeah, I think they both look really good. So the test will be to see if there's a difference in wear time. I never think that I'm gonna see a big difference in the wear time of cheek products, but then when I do these side-by-side wear tests, I do notice some pretty big differences. So for blush, I found 2 formulas that I find extremely similar in my collection. The shades are different, so we'll have to just use our imaginations a little bit. So these are 2 cream blushes that are both matte and that both have a very moussey, whipped sort of texture. So on the high-end side, we have the Kaja Whipped Dream in Meringue Pink, and on the drugstore side, we have the NYX Sweet Cheeks Soft Cheek Tint Blush Mousse in Nude Tude. I've really been loving this recently. So both of these I find apply really similarly and blend really similarly. So there's the Kaja, nice nude peachy pink. Really easy to blend. I would say if you're interested in trying a Kaja cream blush, I definitely recommend the Whipped Dream over the Cheeky Stamp. The Cheeky Stamp is cute, but I just find the application so much easier and so much smoother with the Whipped Dream. I found the Cheeky Stamp would usually just blend out kind of patchy, and the packaging itself was just really bulky. So I would recommend the Whipped Dream over the Cheeky Stamp, personally. Alright, so there's the Kaja. Next for the NYX. This one goes on looking a little scary, but it blends out really nicely, like so easily. I almost feel like that blended out more easily than the Kaja one. Like, look at that. I'm done. Well, now that those are both blended out, I actually don't think the shades look as different as I thought they would side by side. The NYX one is just a little bit deeper, but I mean, the blend was just incredible. So now I'm ready to go in with powder. I only have one high-end powder, and it's the LYS one, and we tested that one along with the CoverGirl Clean Fresh last week. I don't really want to do that combo again because I've already made up my mind that I like the CoverGirl Clean Fresh better. So what I've actually decided to do is to compare 2 drugstore powders instead, because I've been talking a lot recently about how I've been loving the new to me, Revolution Translucent Baking Powder, and I think I might even like it as much or more than the e.l.f. Halo Glow. They're both drugstore, of course. The Revolution one is a much better value though. So I'm gonna try the Revolution one here on the drugstore side and the e.l.f. one on the high-end side, even though, you know, it's not technically high-end, obviously, but I thought that would be an interesting comparison. I have a little bit of creasing under my eyes from both of those concealers since I haven't set yet, but I don't think either one necessarily looks more creasy than the other. I think they're both pretty much what I expect of any concealer, so I'm just gonna gently blend out those creases first and then go in with the Revolution powder. And what I like about this powder is I can apply a really good amount of it and it doesn't look powdery. So if you're someone that likes to use like a pretty generous amount of powder, this is a really good option. All right, then for the Urban Decay side, also tapping out those creases. And there's the e.l.f. Halo Glow. I am really happy with both. All right, and then just setting the rest of my face, I am going to set all over, including on top of the blush, since these are both translucent powders. I'm actually going to skip highlighter today because I don't really have any two that I feel like make sense to compare, and I think that'll just be one less variable, so it'll be easier to compare how everything else is wearing. And then same thing with brow products. I just don't have a ton of brow products to compare, so I just went in with my ABH Dip Brow on both sides, and I'm really excited for the eyeshadow. So I was going through my collection and realized that two of my favorite palettes actually have quite a few shade for shade dupes or really similar shades. So the high-end palette I have is the Sigma Ambiance. That's this one here. Beautiful, warm, neutral palette, one of my favorites. And the Drugstore palette is another one of my favorites, the Wet n Wild Call Me Sunshine. Of course, these aren't shade for shade dupes, but they both have a lot of those warm, caramely, mustard, brown tones. And there are a few shades in each of these palettes that almost match identically. So I'm actually going to try to create a pretty identical look on both sides. For eyeshadow primer, I did apply the Rare Beauty eyeshadow primer on the high-end side and the Alter Ego eyeshadow base on the left side. So for my crease color on the right side, I'm going to go in with Basque from the Sigma Ambiance palette. And then in the Wet n Wild palette, this shade right here, to me, looks very similar to Basque. So that's going to be my crease color on this eye. Let's see how those compare. As far as the quality, I really do feel like the Wet n Wild shadow applied just as well and blended just as easily as the Sigma side. There's a little more warmth to that shade, but other than that, I mean, really not seeing a huge difference. And I had a really easy time blending both. So then I'm going to deepen up the outer corner with a deep brown. So from the Sigma palette, I'm going to use the shade Sunspot. And I'm just taking that on a pencil brush. And then doing the same with this deep brown in the Wet n Wild palette. Alright, so both of those are applied. I'm going back to my fluffy brush and blending out those edges. Taking a little bit more of Basque again on this side. And then grabbing a little bit more of that same shade from the Wet n Wild palette. Make sure both shades are blended together really well. Then on my lid, from the Sigma side, I'm going to use the shade Firefly. This is one of my favorite shimmers in here. Just a really pretty purpley taupe shade. Just tapping that across the lid. And I like to use my finger to apply most shimmers, so that's what I'm going to do for both shimmers today. And there's actually a very similar taupe shade in the Wet n Wild palette, this shade right here. The Wet n Wild shimmer formula is a little bit creamier than the Sigma. Okay, I have a purring bee in my lap, but I am really pleased with both sides. I think the Sigma shimmer is just a little bit more twinkly. That's how a lot of their shimmers are. They have a bit more of like a sparkle through them. And the Wet n Wild one is a bit more of just like a smooth metallic shade. The end result looks really similar, and honestly I kind of like the Wet n Wild formula a little bit more just because it has a bit of a thicker formula. The Sigma formula is very thin, if you know what I mean. Like, the shades are really pretty, but I kind of prefer a bit more of like a creamy thickness to my shimmers. And the Wet n Wild one, most of the Wet n Wild ones are like that. The Sigma ones are kind of just harder pressed, but really I'm happy with the end result of both. For mascara, I have just one drugstore mascara right now, and it's the Revolution 5D Lash Pow. I also have really been enjoying the Ciate Triple Shot XXL mascara, but I do think the Revolution one is better. They both claim to be volumizing though, and I do feel like they have a pretty similar effect on my lashes. This is what the two brushes look like. The narrower one is the Ciate and the thicker one is the Revolution. Very different brushes, but I do think the formulas are pretty similar. Just going in with the Ciate first. So there's the Ciate one. I really like the way that makes my lashes look. It definitely gives some good volume there. Next for the Revolution. I don't usually love big mascara brushes, but I haven't really had much trouble with this Revolution one. I feel like because the brush itself is kind of short, I don't end up making a mess with it like I often do with giant brushes. So yeah, I haven't found the brush to be a problem. So there are those two mascaras on. I pretty much just did one coat, or one, like I only dipped the brush in once for each, and this is what I ended up with. I feel like these two mascaras give a really similar look to the lashes. They're both very black, volumizing, lengthening as well. I feel like both sides are looking really long. Really the test for me is with my lashes, when I have my eye all the way open, if the tips of my lashes are touching my brows, that's when I know it's a good lengthening formula. I feel like both sides look really long. I actually ended up with more of the Ciate on this eyelid than I did with the Revolution on the left eyelid. I always end up with a little bit like right there above my lash line on the skin. I'm gonna try to flake it off. Just slightly. Okay, I flaked it off as best I could with the spoolie. Really excited because I have a new lip liner that I'm testing for the first time today against my long-standing favorite, which is the Kokie lip liner in Nude. So the new one here looks like a really similar shade to Kokie Nude. This is from Jones Road, which, by the way, I'm shocked that Jones Road did not kick me off their PR list after my not-so-glowing review of the Miracle Balm. Well, I was fully expecting to be kicked off their PR list, but I guess we're still friends because they sent over their new lip liners. And the shade Nudist in the Jones Road one looks awfully similar to the Kokie one. So there are those two. Kokie is on top, Jones Road is on the bottom. I do think the Kokie one looks a little bit lighter, but let's see how these compare on my lips. Starting with the Jones Road, this is the first time I've applied this lip pencil. My lips are kind of dry today, so I guess that just means we're giving these products a good test to see how they look on super dry lips. But that went on really nicely, really smoothly. Doesn't seem too creamy, but also not stiff at all. Okay, so there's the Jones Road one. I mainly outlined and then just did a little bit here, like the very corners, and blended it with my finger. So there's what that one looks like. And now for the Kokie. Alright, well, I just went to help Nathan carry groceries in, and take a look at this. I was just about to say, one thing that's unique about the Kokie formula is that it locks in and it is like completely waterproof. What do you know, that swatch held up on my hand a lot longer than the Jones Road. Yep, see? So, I mean, of course, most lip liners don't lock in like that, so I wasn't necessarily expecting the Jones Road one to, but I did just want to point that out. This is just more of a traditional pencil liner, but is it necessary to spend the money on the high-end liner? Time will tell. I also chose two really similar lipsticks that I think are gonna go well with these liners. The high-end one is from BK Beauty in the shade Grace, and the drugstore one is one of my favorite drugstore ones from Wet n Wild in Skinny Dipping. Both formulas that I really like. So starting with the BK, there's that one, and then the Wet n Wild. Slight difference in finish for sure. The Wet n Wild one is more matte than the BK Beauty. So I really like this look on both sides. I actually, right now, I don't think I have a strong preference for one side or the other. I really do think the drugstore side looks just as good as the high-end side. I think everything blended really well. In the last side-by-side comparison I did, the drugstore cheek products were really the giveaway, I think, for which side was drugstore, because they just didn't look quite as blended as the high-end side. But today I really don't think that's the case. I really feel like both sides blended really well. And same goes for the eyeshadow. So if you guys want a really close up look, so here's the drugstore side. And here's the high-end side. So as far as the wear test, it's 2 o'clock right now. I started filming this video at like 11, so I would say, let's say 1 o'clock is our start time for the makeup, because it has been a while since most of this has been on my face. So we'll go with 1 o'clock. I'm going to try to do an 8-hour wear test. I probably will do one in between as well, like sometime later this afternoon, and then I'll do another one before bed so we can see how everything held up. But I'll do the sooner one just so we can see how the lipstick is holding up. But I think that's it for now. I will see you guys in just a few hours. Okay, so I'm here for my first check-in. It's actually about 7 o'clock now, so a little bit more time passed than I meant to, but the main reason I wanted to do this first check-in was to show you how the lip products held up. The drugstore lip products definitely held up longer than the high-end, which doesn't really surprise me at all because that Cookie lip liner is so long-wearing to begin with, and the Wet n Wild lipstick is more matte than the BK Beauty lipstick on the high-end side. So I would expect it to hold up longer. So I really don't see much lip liner or lipstick on the high-end side left. Everything else seems to be holding up pretty well also. I have to say though, as far as complexion goes, I am liking the e.l.f. side a lot more now that the day has gone on than the Urban Decay one. I just feel like it seems to be breaking apart a little bit faster on this side, and it's just looking a little bit more textured, especially kind of in this area. Compared to the e.l.f. I just feel like the e.l.f. side looks a lot smoother. Just looks a little bit less makeup-y, and the Urban Decay side, you can definitely tell there's a layer of foundation that's been on my skin for a good bit of the day now. So I don't feel like either blush has faded much. Keep in mind the Kaja one is a little bit lighter of a shade as it is, but that one seems to have held up pretty well. I definitely think the NYX one has held up well. The eyeshadows so far are also holding up really well. And I actually haven't gotten any flaking on the Ciate mascara side. This one sometimes does flake, but so far it hasn't. We'll see if it does by the end of the night. But so that's my midday check-in. I'll be back in a few hours before I go to bed to show you how it held up for the rest of the day. Okay, so it is now 10:17. I made it actually over 9 hours from our estimated start time. So lipstick is pretty much gone from both sides. No surprise there. I obviously didn't reapply any of the lip products throughout the day. I still prefer the e.l.f. Halo Glow foundation on this side. It just looks a lot more natural and skin-like, and I do feel like the Urban Decay foundation is looking kind of obvious. It just looks a little bit dry, textured, broken apart. I do think that some of the e.l.f. Halo Glow has faded, but it's faded really gracefully and it doesn't look separated and textured and dry like the Urban Decay one does, and this one is also breaking apart, but in a much more visible way. I really prefer something that can fade more evenly into my skin tone, and it seems like the e.l.f. Halo Glow is doing that. So I feel like maybe the bronzer faded a little bit from both sides, but honestly I prefer the way it looks here on the drugstore side. I prefer this cheek. I think it looks a little bit smoother and more even. What do you guys think? Sometimes things translate differently on camera than what I see right here. I do feel like the LA Girl concealer looks a little bit more dry than the Urban Decay one. I think this one looks a little bit fresher over here. And keep in mind this under eye, I do feel like it has more fine lines. So it's kind of hard to compare because my two under eyes are so different from each other. The eyeshadow held up pretty well. I feel like it may have faded a little bit on the Sigma side, and I would mostly attribute that to the Rare Beauty eyeshadow primer. And you'll also notice, unfortunately, that Ciate mascara did end up flaking. Got a few little flakes here. Yeah, this mascara does, I just kind of wiped them away, but this mascara does have a tendency to flake. So let me know if you think there was a clear winner here. For me, I mean, I have to say I I think I was happier with more of the drugstore products than I was the high-end products. And a lot of that probably has to do with the base just working so well on this side, because that really does affect the entire rest of your look. But all of those drugstore products performed beautifully. Like, they really did deliver on quality. I feel like they competed very well with some of my favorite high-end products. So can't wait to hear your thoughts below. Let me know if you're enjoying these side-by-side comparison videos and if there are any other types of these videos you would like for me to do, because I'm definitely having fun with this format. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying my content, I do also have a Patreon and a channel membership. You can join either one for $2 a month. And my patrons and members every month get access to a bonus video and an exclusive live stream, so I would love to have you over there. Otherwise, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, and I will talk to you again very soon in my next video. Bye!